This time on PedalBox, we're getting in our long-neglected engine bay under the cover and getting through a whole load of little nickel and dime bits ready for the IVA. We've spent the last year or so bouncing around the car quite a lot as we figure out all these little tiny bits and pieces that are left over for the IVA, as we get parts in, as we figure out how to solve problems. And now it's time to get back under the engine bay cover, back in here, and tidy up a few more bits and pieces that we've been kicking down the road for a while. Like a lot of our other episodes lately, this isn't going to have like a nice big payoff that we can point to and say, look at this big awesome thing we've done. It's going to be a little bit of a blitz around lots of like half-finished bits here in the engine bay. One of which, most visible, I'm not sure if any of you have been watching for a while, but you may notice there's a big orange thing that's not installed on that side of the car. And that's our old air filter holder. This was a 3D printed piece that we did a good while ago now. Unfortunately, the design of it was, fair to say, a little bit flawed. It had a really, really massive weak point in this join here, and it completely gave up some months ago now. So we're going to have to redesign and reprint that, get that back installed so that our air filter can be back in place. We've got to get some O2 sensors. We've got to figure out what O2 sensors we need for a start, then we've got to buy and install those on the exhaust. We've got some boost plumbing that we've got to rig up over on the other side. We don't actually know what it does, we just know that it was connected to the boost pipes originally, so we're going to rebuild all of that and get that plumbed in. There's a coolant line on the far end of the engine there that's kinked because it's kind of sitting funny where we've tweaked things around, so we're going to have to build a bracket to kind of hold everything in shape over there. And since I've managed to borrow some fairly hefty crimping tools and other stuff, we're also going to try and get our battery wires done so that once we've got a new ECU, we're actually able to power this thing. Now, before we get into any of that, we're going to do ourselves a favour because we're going to be in here for quite a while. We're going to pop the engine bay cover off one more time, and actually that's another job for us because underneath here there's quite a lot of jank that we should probably clean up a little bit. So we'll start easy with the nice simple bits. I have in my hands our lambda sensor wires. We're going to try and figure out a safe route that we can run these, that they won't sit on the exhaust or anything like that. So we're going to play around, see where they run. Now one of them's got to get here. That's a 6-pin, the shorter one here. That's for a wideband that goes before the cat. And then there's a 4-pin narrowband sensor that goes just the other side of it. So, now a bit of a play around with these, see where it all lands, and see what we can use to pin them in place. Well, after a few minutes playing around, we think we've got a viable route. We've got the 6-pin here is running around the inside of our rear chassis arm. We've got the 4-pin running further back across there, and that's hopefully both of these are going to reach the tails of whatever sensors we buy. So to hold them in place, particularly this one here, we're going to 3D print up some little cable holders that we're going to bond onto the bottom of the spoiler with a bit of epoxy and see how that all ends up. And then once we're back inside this evening, once we're done on the tools, we'll get those sensors ordered in. Moving around a little bit, we've got hopefully another nice easy win ahead of us. We've got a boost line here coming out of the turbocharger, and this isn't the original boost pipe. The way this used to be plumbed is boost would come up out the turbo here, same place, but it would run across through a metal pipe on here and then forward into the intercooler. Now, because of the way we've routed everything, we've had to get rid of that pipe and, crucially, get rid of the two bosses that used to be on it that would take these two hoses. Now, frankly, we've got no idea what they do, no idea what their job is. I've tried looking at these things and I can see what looks like a little sensor or maybe an actuator there, but whatever they are, they're probably important, so we're going to replicate their attachment on here. Now, it's a pretty simple piece. We've just got to swing them around, which thankfully the hoses are fairly happy with that. They're not like kinked or folded over or anything. We're going to run one of them just into the top here, so we've marked up where that's going to go, and we've got the other smaller one, and we've got another mark on the back of the boost pipe where that's going to run in there. So all we've got to do for now is find out what size these are so that we can order the right size barbs, or bosses, to attach these onto. So this pipe is a 20, it's a bit rounded, sorry, a bit oval even, so I'm not entirely sure, but I'm pretty sure that is a 22mm ID. And this one much smaller, so I'm guessing this probably is just a little pressure sensor or something. That one is 7mm, that's a weird number, but let's go with it. They'll probably fit over like an 8mm barb or something, so I'll have to get those ordered in. And now because this is aluminium, we can't weld this ourselves, so just like the O2 bungs that we've got on our exhaust pipe, we're going to have to run this round to our buddies at Ignition where they've got a TIG machine, and they'll be able to weld them on for us. And moving quickly on to our third job of the day, we've got a little canister looking thing on here that rigs onto one of the little coolant pipes. Now there's a 3-way manifold that I've just noticed there's a hole in. So you're going to have to replace the manifold, but even if we do that, we still have to fix a layout problem. So the way everything sits at the minute, we've got a coolant line in the end there that kind of kinks over when it kind of all hangs where it just falls into. So we're going to make a little bracket that fits around our air intakes. We've noticed when we hold this canister up here, everything kind of unkinks and it all looks fairly happy. So we're going to model that up, get that printed tonight, and get this all in place. Aid's just dipped inside to go and do the CAD and the print up of that bracket to hold our little coolant manifold thing in place. And while he's doing that, I'm going to move on to the first actually big job of this whole episode, which is getting some of our battery plumbing sorted. Now, years and years and years ago, and it was a lot more accessible back then, we put a little battery, not so much a shelf, but like a little battery cage down in the very back corner, or front corner, I suppose, of the engine bay. And hopefully with the battery in there, you can see the label, which actually show you where everything is. So we've got obviously the negative and positive terminals on the battery. We've got a whole bunch of wires coming and going from various different places on the car. So you've got to try and figure out how to get all of those different connectors. We've got power to the starter, power from the alternator, power off to the fuse box at the front and everything else. We've got to figure out how to get all of it onto this tiny little terminal here. Now we do actually have two places we can attach. We've got the post itself, which is a little M6 thread that we can probably screw down a little ring terminal onto. And there's also a little threaded section on the copper at the front. So we've got two places to attach everything to, but two is still a lot less than four. So this could get quite interesting. We've removed a whole bunch of little bits and pieces from the corner here to give us and you better access down in here so we can see and work a little bit easier. Now, having done that, and having also had a look under the bonnet of one of our other 20 VT cars that we've got here on site, we've actually worked out this is probably going to be quite a bit easier than we first feared. So I was thinking between the alternator feed, the starter motor feed, the fuse box feed, and possibly one to like the ECU and the sort of engine loom, I thought we might have 4 different 12-volt lines all coalescing here. But thankfully, it looks like VW have done quite a lot of that aggregation for us. This fuse box down here, which I can't show you inside, the tails on it aren't long enough, but this fuse box down here obviously has one lead that comes out to the battery, but one of the other 12-volt leads that we had under here, which I thought would be like a third one that we'd have to get onto the battery, actually goes into it. So that gets us down by 1, and further upstream of this is where it breaks out to like the alternator and all the other stuff for the engine. So it's actually only 2 12-volt feeds that we've got to get onto the battery. Conveniently, I think this one is already give or take the right size to fit onto any bolt that we could fit onto that little like flange, that little threaded bent up section on the copper. And the starter motor lead is a little bit trickier. So it's already got this crimped on end that went onto the factory 12-volt terminal. Unfortunately, this is not really very easy at all for us to attach onto the battery, so we're going to have to chop that off and then replace it with a new ring terminal. Now, this is a pretty serious piece of electricery, so we're going to have to use a fairly serious crimp tool. Thankfully, my dad is a spark, and I've managed to borrow a nice big hydraulic crimper off him that should make short work of these connections. So the 12-volt side should be fairly simple. Now, we haven't spent quite as much time poring over the earth or ground side, but as near as I can tell, that's actually even easier. So I can't see any other earth cables coming in from anywhere besides this big one down here, which, like many other bits here, you can't see because it's too short. So we've got here a nice big ring terminal that's already just about perfect to go on our battery. The only problem is it's a bit short. Now, ages and ages ago, we did put a nice little welded on thread on our chassis leg here. So I think our plan a while ago was that we'd earth through that onto the body, and then we would have a separate earth strap from the battery to the body. That may or may not be done. We don't really know. We're probably going to do a bit of research when we get inside. If it does turn out that it's done, we'll have to lock that off as well, couple it onto a slightly extended piece of cable and run it directly onto the battery. But if it turns out it's okay to go via the body, obviously that makes our life a little bit easier. So let's get on the tools. So we took our starter cable out of the car just so it would be a little bit easier to work on. Obviously crimping down in there would be kind of a pain. And when we went to cut the end off and everything, we thought maybe it'd be smart to check what size the cable itself is, just in case the 70mm or 30mm lugs that I've got won't fit it. And annoyingly, it's a 50 square mil cable. So even if it would still be long enough, which it'd be a bit touch and go, but even if it'd still be long enough after being re-terminated, it's useless because we haven't got any 50mm lugs. So we've got to change it out for something else anyway, and that leaves us with 3 options. We've got the 70mm that I brought up for the weekend. We've got some 35mm stuff that I brought up. This is brilliant because obviously it's red insulated cable, so it makes it very obvious it's a 12 volt. It'd be a lot harder to wire the battery the wrong way around or anything. But being 35mm, it is a bit narrower than the 50mm that was on here originally, so probably want to avoid that if we can. We've also got, Aid pulled this one out the cupboard a little while ago, this absolute comedy option, which is the main power feed from his old A6 that got written off a while ago. This powered everything in the car, albeit obviously the thing that you care about most is the starter. That's the highest demand thing in there. And this had to run the whole length of it. Now that's a starter for a big 3-litre diesel, and it's about 1 million miles away from the batteries. This is an absolutely comically big cable. It may even be bigger than the 70 square mil stuff I brought up. But the main thing that we like about it is it's way more flexible than the 70 I've brought. It's just much easier to bend around into whatever shape we want it and get it kind of positioned in there nicely. So we're probably going to go with this if we can. Annoyingly, we do have to re-terminate both ends of it. Now, obviously, we have to shorten it. That's kind of a given, so we'd have to redo one end. But this end here, the bend is actually a bit too early, so it can't get round the side of the battery. But even if it could, like this end can, the ring connector on the end is so thick, there'd actually be no thread left on the little post on the battery to get the nut on to hold it in place. So we're going to have to re-terminate it anyway, which means that hopefully this is a 70mm. If it's any bigger, our lugs won't fit, and we will then be forced to use either one of these two. So we're going to lop this down, get it to about the right length, and then measure out the conductor section in the middle and make sure it'll fit these, because if it does, that'd be brilliant. So we finished making up our starter cable here. This is all ready to go. The only thing that would be nice to do another time would be get some red heat shrink on this end. Unfortunately, none that we've got in the garage will quite fit. But apart from that, this is actually completely done. Now, we tried using the very, very big cable that came off Aid's A6. We cut some down. We spent a second trying to finagle the lug on. Unfortunately, because although it's a similar sort of size on the outside, there seems to be thinner insulation around the outside of it. This is actually internally somewhere around like 100, 110 square mils. It's nearly 50% bigger than the 70mm stuff I brought up. And unsurprisingly, when you try and put 100 square mil of copper in a 70 square mil lug, it doesn't work. So we had to scrap that plan and go back to the 70mm stuff that I brought up. And in fairness, it actually works fairly well. The stiffness of it turned out to be a bit of a benefit because we could sort of pre-bend it round into the right shape, and it's going to kind of hold itself where we want it. So we shouldn't even have to like pin it anywhere, which is quite convenient. One interesting little thing to notice, I mentioned that the 70mm I brought up is really quite a stiff cable compared to the one that we took out the A6. And once we got the insulation off, we could see the conductors, the individual copper strands in the A6's cable, in the bigger, thicker cable, are actually way, way thinner, and there's way more of them in there compared to my 70mm, which is a much smaller number of much bigger strands of copper, which I think technically makes it like a marginally better conductor per area, but it does also make it, you know, really, really stiff compared to what Audi did on this one. But in the end, we're all good. We've got power into our starter motor, or at least, you know, once this is all together, we will. So we can now move on to figuring out the ground side. Well, the 12-volt lead to the starter is already half in. We've got it on the starter. We've got it most of the way around to the battery terminal. We haven't actually bolted it on because we're not going to leave the battery in the car overnight. But we now have to just check up the ground lead and just make sure that's all good now that that's done. Now, I mentioned earlier that we may or may not go into that grounding post into the body and then from the body back to the battery. We kind of split the difference. We kept the existing cable that only just made it to that ground post. And we're going to attach the ground lead to the battery to the same post. It's effectively just working as a little bus there that both of these are going to connect to. And that seems pretty much perfect. So we're going to bolt the ends of these down. We're going to bolt the 12 volt onto the starter because currently it's just loose there. Bolt our ground cable on, pop the battery out, and then I think it's time to put the tools away.
So here's my printed bracket. I've made it in 2 parts because I want to use the layer lines to my advantage. If I'd printed it in 1 part, we would have had a problem with this hook. It probably would have just snapped off. So I printed this one this way up in this orientation so that the layer lines are going to striate up through the part in this direction. That gives me a nice strong but still quite flexible part to clip around this large hose. The next one, if I'd printed it the same way, I would have had layer lines through and it would have snapped off when I tried to bend it, and that's not going to work for me. So instead I printed it in a second part with the second hook in this orientation. Again, the layer lines go this way and it wraps around, so hopefully this will be flexible enough to hold on to there. Now I've tested both of these parts independently and then joined them together with some little melt-in M5 inserts and a couple of bolts, but I haven't actually been able to check how strong it is and how well it holds in place. So we'll just pop this on here. That fits really nicely as expected, and then this should grip pretty well on there. It just wants to pull back a little bit further. Yeah, it holds nicely, but it does try and pop out just a little bit too far. There's enough of a shelf there to hold it in the right place, but you can see with any vibration, with any movement, it's going to pop back out. So I'm probably going to have to go and reprint another one of these. I'll take those inserts out and reuse them and make this hook a little bit further round. They come around 220 degrees around the pipe at the moment. This one probably wants to go a bit further than that just to make sure it has a good grasp, because it is a much smaller pipe. So the actual overhang, the distance from sort of the dead center to the edge, isn't very much when you compare it to that one. But otherwise, that works pretty well. Now, we're definitely going to reprint these in some heat-tolerant plastic because a number of you have commented that the PLA will not survive, and yes, we absolutely know the PLA will not survive, but it is the easiest stuff for us to recycle and reuse. We can chop this up, melt it down into new filament, and use it for drafting parts in the future. So we'll get that done, pop it all back together, and we should be good. Well, fortunately, there's actually less that I need to do to this while Chris is just putting some of the engine back together. There is only this piece of metal that needs trimming. The one on the other side runs right the way up into this original gusset that we used for the pivots. So I just need to trim this down because this is still extremely sharp and I've not had this off the car at any point to do this before. So I'm going to get that done. The other side is fine, as I say, and the hinges are actually in really good condition, all things considered. Quick bit of paint, primer, then paint, and this will be going back on the car and we'll be done. Well, that's a bunch of jobs crossed off the list. Extremely satisfying to get those out of the way. We are getting ever closer to the end of our list so we can get this booked in for the IVA. Thanks very much for watching. Thank you for sticking with us throughout the project, especially if you've been here right from the beginning, and thanks very much to our long-suffering patrons as well. You can join our Patreons at patreon.com/pedalboxshow, and if you are a patron and you're thinking about buying one of these lovely t-shirts or something similar that I'm wearing, you can go to shop.pedalbox.show where you can buy t-shirts, hats, mugs, and all sorts of other bits and pieces. Once again, thank you very much for watching, thanks for sticking with us, and we will see you in the next episode.